Hi everyone, this is Piyush Ranjan, the founder and chief consultant of Management Masters, a boutique admissions consultancy firm for top MBA and MIM programs in the world. Now, today we have a very special guest for our next video interview. Now, she has an admit from Stanford GSB and along with a Reliance Dhirubhai Ambani Fellowship Award, which will help her cover more than 80% of her tuition fees. Now, at the same time, she also has admits from Wharton and a waitlist from Sloan. So she did her bachelor's from IIT BHU, where she uh, initiated and took and promoted programs for a lot of technical events. At the same time, also promoting it for the female students. So let's hear it from her. We have Chanchal Bhoorani with us. So Chanchal, why don't you give us a brief introduction about yourself and tell us how did you come to apply to Stanford and Wharton, and how does it feel to actually get shortlisted by these schools?
Hi Piyush, thank you for having me here. So a brief introduction about me. I'm born and brought up in a small town in Jaipur, Rajasthan. As you said, did my BTech in metallurgical engineering from IIT BHU. I was working in college. I was more involved in a lot of technical activities and also with a social student-run NGO called Kashi Utkarsh. And after that, I've been working with a lot of companies in Bangalore, starting with Mu Sigma as an analyst, then moved on to work with Ola as a product analyst, and then later moved into product management at Ola itself. And then currently I'm working with Zilingo, which is a fashion e-commerce startup. Most of you guys might not have heard about it in product management. Yeah.
Worked at some of the biggest companies in India when it comes to the startup world. So from Mu Sigma to Ola and then to Zilingo. For those who don't know, Zilingo is recently. I read an article about Zilingo recently, and it's supposed to be. It's moving very fast towards becoming another unicorn from India. First question from my part is basically why did you, at this point of time, when you're already a product manager at Zilingo, uh, why did you feel the need for an MBA?
Okay, so yeah, that's the most tricky question that I have had to answer in my application, MBA application as well. Yeah, so I'm a person who's never been too keen on doing an MBA. I've never written a cat when all the people around me had been writing it for years. And a lot of my friends have graduated from MBA or from a lot of IMs or some MBAs already. I had always had the mindset that I'll go for MBA only when I feel the need for it, for some reason or the other, and not just for the sake of doing it. Now, even though I moved into product management, which is usually considered a post MBA industry, without it itself, that's the question that get asked the most. Why MBA now? I feel uh, there are some personal and some professional reasons why I chose to go for MBA at this point. One was I'd always wanted to study abroad, just to get some global exposure, not from the work point of view, but also make some close friends, which have been raised differently, have seen a different circumstances, who have seen world from a different point of view, which is very difficult to to do when you are working abroad, and very difficult to make that sort of friends. And also I wanted to get some real quality education, not undermining what happens here in India, but it's just that engineering was not something my interest. So even though we had some good professors, I was not into studying so much. Yeah, also I wanted to build a network, because at some point in time I want to start on my own venture. So being in Bay Area, or being in one of the top B schools, the kind of exposure you get is something that's very difficult to get without it. So yeah, those were my two big reasons, personal and professional, to go for an MBA at this point.
That's great. Cultural experiences. From my personal experiences, I can tell you that the amount of cultural learning that you have abroad is absolutely it's very much different from what you will have in India. Of course, in India we come from different cultures, but then the essence of how we are raised, that remains almost the same throughout the different
Yeah.
cultures that we have in India. and that itself changes completely when you go outside. So I'm
Yeah.
pretty sure you will also have, oh, what moments when you go there? Like, wait, sorry, you cannot do it this way. And then realize, no, people do it that way. So
Yeah.
yeah, that's a pretty good reason. That's a very, very nice motivation for actually going for an MBA outside. Now, when you started preparing for your MBA, when did you start preparing for it? And the second part of this question would be, what sort of problems did you face while you were preparing for it, and how did you actually solve them?
Okay, so I actually did it in a very bad way. I wouldn't recommend anybody to follow that or even think about doing that. I started pretty late. I got to know about this Reliance Dhirubhai Fellowship, I think a week before the deadline. A colleague of mine told me that this is happening. And that was the week I was also getting into a new job. I had just joined Zilingo that week itself. And I think it was about 8 or 9 days in the deadline. So but the fellowship, thankfully the fellowship process isn't very intense, so that went fine. And right after that I was supposed to write GMAT, which I delayed forever, and I couldn't write it well at all, because first being in a new job, and I was traveling all the time. um, I actually properly started writing my application in December end, uh, December mid to end, and 3rd Jan and 10th Jan are the deadlines. So I think I could have done much better there. So probably not a good thing to do. Anybody around, like, I know my consultant was real mad at me forever, and I was getting stinkers from him forever. You gotta write fast, but yeah, uh, pretty late.
Okay.
And the kind of problems I was facing, yeah, one of the biggest challenge for me was I did not know folks in any of the top B schools. The best I could do was get some second or third degree connections. And since I was so late, I had to ask people to give me time right away, which wasn't always possible. So, for instance, Stanford, I spoke to a very old alum, I think 2012 or 2013 graduate, and not anybody which has graduated recently. And I think because I couldn't get hold of anybody that way. Yeah, I think those are the biggest problems I feel folks face. Everybody is reading what's out there on the internet, but when you talk to people, I got lucky to get to know somebody who was studying at Harvard. So the kind of perception I got from them was very different from what's out there on the internet. Yeah, so that was definitely helpful.
Okay, that sounds, yeah, that is also, I think, one of the biggest points that consultants mention usually, that if you're looking for a school, it's not only about the internet search that you need to do, you also need to talk to actual people who have studied from there, who have been part of the
Yeah.
school, because that gives you a much different idea compared to what you see on the internet. You'll never see a school writing, no, don't come to this program, it's a bad program. So
Yeah, and actually, one more thing is what's there on the internet. All the applicants can see that. That's an information that's available to everybody. But if you want to show the school that you are really interested, you really care, that then they expect you to have spoken to somebody who has studied or somebody who knows the school much better than what's just available to everybody.
yeah, okay, totally agree.
Yeah.
So the next point in this question, or rather the next question, then basically becomes, which colleges did you apply to? So you have an admit from Stanford, Wharton, and a waitlist from Sloan, but then what did you apply to?
So I applied to HBS too. Um, yeah, I did not even get an interview invite there. Um, yeah, and those are the only 4 schools that I applied. Again, I was so late, I couldn't even apply to more. And personally, I wasn't too keen on joining anybody else.
Okay, but that actually is a very big sort of learning for prospective students, that you could get an admit from Stanford, but at the same time, the values at HBS probably differ so much that you didn't even get an interview call.
Yeah,
So
yeah, for it.
Yeah,
at
and it's
HBS. Yeah.
absolutely nothing to do with, you don't have a good profile or something. If you have a profile good
Yeah,
enough for
yeah, for
Stanford,
sure.
Wharton,
Yeah, yeah, and in fact, in the last 1 week, I've met so many HBS admits, and we all have been discussing what did we do right or wrong. Why did they not get Stanford interview invite, and why did I not get HBS interview invite? And I think there's not much difference. It's just in terms of our application. It's just basically our application across Stanford or Harvard. It's just that the kind of people we are, the kind of folks that these schools are looking for, is just fundamentally very different.
yeah. All right. So I'll go a bit more technical in terms of when you apply to Stanford,
Mhm.
and you got the essays, obviously. So one of the most iconic essays from Stanford is basically what matters to you the most and why does it matter to you the most. So if you could tell us about how did you actually
Yeah,
go about tackling this
yeah.
question and how did you answer this question, I think this could be super important or super interesting for the viewers.
Okay, so Stanford's question, I think that's one good thing. One thing that I did right after I got the Dhirubhai Fellowship, I went through Stanford's essay questions, and those were the only two questions: what matters to you the most and why Stanford, that I'd seen before December. And so, though the 5 months after the fellowship, I couldn't spend on actively working on the application. Back at the back of my head, I always had these questions. So I was constantly all the time looking back and trying to figure out what it is, trying to connect some dots, trying to see if there is a pattern in my life or in and trying to figure out what actually it is. And so for the 5 months, I've been taking a lot of notes. I still couldn't see the common thread, which my consultant helped me see. That see, this is the thread, and I think for me it was to sum it up in few words. It's creation of opportunities. I come from a small village where leave alone women, even boys don't study, and it's not education is not really considered a priority, wherein my mother, on the other hand, was of the opinion that I really should get good education. So she fought with a lot of folks to get me to where I am. So there she was creating opportunities for me, fighting with folks, arranging for money from here and there. And then when I came to college, now I had to do everything on my own. So there, I was trying to figure out how to create opportunities for myself in a system where I felt I was fresh off the board. I did not know how things go around here. And not just myself, I also tried to now, once I was in a position after a few years, I was trying to create opportunities for others. So that was the whole essence of my essay. I did not really talk about anything professionally that I've done, but it was just everything was personal.
That is a brilliant point. Huh? If you come from such a background where you need to create opportunities, I think that really makes your character very very strong. And I've seen you personally even while we were in college. So uh, kudos to you. It's absolutely amazing. So I think we're coming more towards the end of the interview itself. I have a very very quick question, as in how do you actually plan to use your next 2 years at Stanford? Those are going to be
Okay.
very very important years, I guess, in your life. So, do you
Yeah,
have
yeah.
any plans already? Are you already working on strategies how to utilize the make the most of it?
Oh, not really. I'm still working, and so as always, as I couldn't make time for my application, I've not been able to go about those 2 years concretely. But on top of my head, as like the biggest thing for me is to just meet people, not from professional networking point of view, but from getting to know folks, which has been one of my key motivator to go for a B school abroad. So I just plan to make a lot of friends, and since I'm going to be in the Bay Area, meet a lot of founders and see where the startup ecosystem is going, and so that maybe something strikes me and I can figure out what do I want to do next. Yeah.
Nice. And the final question. So, as part of the Reliance Zero Biome scholarship itself, you need to come back to India within 4 years and spend 2 years in the next 4 years after graduating. So, do you already have plans, or do
Yeah.
you have any ideas? What are you going to do once you're back in India, or are you going to see it once you're
One
done
of
with
the
your
key things
studies?
that I'm going to go to do there is to figure out what area, what segment, what industry I want to start up in. I know it's most likely going to be internet tech, but exactly what problem to solve, I have a bunch of things in mind. So I want to I'm going to be experimenting and talking to folks to figure out what makes more sense and get some rough idea on how to go about solving that problem. And actually for now I just intend to come back to India right after, so that I can bootstrap. I know bootstrapping in US is going to be extremely difficult. Yeah, so I intend to come back right away, and whatever that idea is, I plan to start working on it right after.
That is absolutely amazing. So this is great to hear that you want to go, you want to bootstrap, you want to have your own startup, you plan to utilize the connections made at Stanford as much as possible, and at the same time you want to have your own startup right back in India, in the segment, in the industry that you are most familiar with, that you have worked in for the last 5 years,
Yeah.
5 odd years. So it has been a pleasure talking to you, Chanchal. Thank you so much, and I wish you all the best.